Have you ever faced betrayal that shook you to your very core? Nathaniel Cross had spent years building an empire from the shadows, only to discover his own wife and business partner conspiring against him in ways he never imagined. Standing at the crossroads between justice and vengeance, he must decide whether this devastating blow will destroy him or finally force him into the light to reclaim everything he built. Sometimes the hardest challenges reveal strength we never knew we possessed. The towering headquarters of Meridian Technologies gleamed against the overcast sky, its 47 stories reaching toward the clouds like glass fingers. From his modest office on the 23rd floor, Nathaniel Cross gazed out over the city, his reflection ghost-like in the window. To the world, he appeared as nothing more than another operations manager, competent but unremarkable, quietly handling logistics while others basked in spotlights. Yet beneath this carefully cultivated facade, Nathaniel owned the very empire that surrounded him. For 10 years, he had built Meridian Technologies from nothing, always allowing someone else to take credit for the achievements that transformed it into a technological juggernaut. His wife Helena believed she was married to a man who chose modest living by preference, someone who deliberately avoided attention. But that was only part of a much larger truth. The genesis of his shadow strategy traced back to those early startup days when two original partners had attempted to force him out of his own company. That betrayal taught him never again to expose vulnerability by being the public face of his creation. Instead, he learned to build from darkness, letting others claim glory while maintaining absolute control over substance. This philosophy extended beyond business into personal protection. The tech industry harbored numerous threats, enemies who might target a CEO's family through kidnapping or worse. By remaining invisible, Nathaniel could shield Helena and their children from dangers that came with wealth and power. He wanted genuine relationships, love based on character rather than bank accounts. Felix Morrison, his oldest friend and only confidant who knew the complete truth, often questioned this approach, but Nathaniel remained convinced that authentic connections required this level of secrecy. Today marked their 15th wedding anniversary, yet instead of anticipation, Nathaniel felt only cold certainty about what lay ahead. He had known for months about the affair between Helena and Connor Walsh, the charismatic public face everyone believed was Meridian's visionary founder and CEO. The evolution of their relationship had unfolded before his eyes like a slow-motion catastrophe. Subtle glances in boardrooms, whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. Helena's increasingly frequent absences explained by vague excuses about social commitments. But the betrayal ran deeper than infidelity. Through his discreet surveillance network, Nathaniel had discovered their conspiracy to systematically dismantle his control over Meridian while positioning Connor as the undisputed leader and Helena as his perfect corporate spouse. Helena's growing resentment had been building for years, though she never voiced it directly. She suffocated in their deliberately modest suburban home while watching friends live glamorous lives befitting their wealth. The suffocation came not from lack of money, but from enforced secrecy about their true financial status. Unable to share her reality with anyone, Helena existed in isolation, playing the role of a middle manager's wife while knowing they could afford any luxury. This emotional abandonment, as she saw it, justified her gradual drift toward Connor, who offered everything she craved: public acknowledgement, social status, and most importantly, visibility in the world that mattered to her. Connor Walsh carried his own desperate hunger for validation, though he hid it beneath polished confidence. Two previous startups had ended in spectacular failure, leaving him nearly finished in the tech world before Nathaniel offered him the role of Meridian's public CEO. What began as grateful cooperation had slowly transformed into genuine belief in his own carefully crafted mythology. Connor convinced himself that his Harvard MBA and natural charisma made him the real architect of Meridian's success, relegating Nathaniel to a supporting role as merely competent operations manager. The imposter syndrome that should have humbled him instead drove him toward increasingly audacious moves to prove his worthiness of the position he had never truly earned. Nathaniel's phone buzzed with a message from Felix. "They're at the Grandview Hotel again, Suite 412. You certain about tonight?" The text tightened something in his chest, but he knew the time for waiting had passed. 6 months of evidence gathering had provided him with everything needed to expose their conspiracy completely. It was no longer about the affair, though that cut deeply enough. Helena and Connor were attempting to steal his life's work while manipulating his children to see him as an unambitious failure. His son Gregory, now 17, had openly expressed embarrassment about his father's apparent lack of career drive during family gatherings. His daughter Isabel, 15, remained confused but increasingly distant as Helena subtly undermined Nathaniel's authority through countless small poisonings of their relationship. The modest sedan Nathaniel drove home that evening represented just another layer of his carefully maintained facade. Helena's luxury Range Rover sat in their driveway, another gift from Connor that she had accepted with fabricated surprise when Nathaniel knew they had chosen it together during one of their hotel meetings. Walking through the front door, he encountered the scene Helena had orchestrated with theatrical precision. Expensive champagne, chilling in crystal glasses, delicate china arranged perfectly, candles flickering across surfaces polished to reflect their golden light. It was performance art masquerading as matrimonial celebration. Helena emerged from the kitchen wearing a designer dress that hugged her frame flawlessly, her makeup applied with professional skill, every detail arranged to create maximum impact. But something in her posture betrayed her awareness that this evening would not proceed according to her script. She stood too straight, smiled too broadly, spoke with voice pitched slightly higher than natural. "You're home early," she said, the words carrying forced lightness that convinced neither of them. Nathaniel set down his briefcase and studied her face, memorizing this moment when their 15-year marriage would finally shed its pretenses. The woman he had loved completely was preparing to deliver what she believed would be his destruction. "I thought we could spend the evening together," Helena continued, gesturing toward the elaborate table setting. "After all, it is our anniversary." Her smile flickered as she added, "Actually, we need to discuss something important." Nathaniel leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms as he absorbed the full scope of her preparation. This was not spontaneous celebration, but calculated theater, designed to provide elegant backdrop for whatever devastating news she planned to deliver. Perhaps she intended to ask for divorce while surrounded by symbols of their better days. Or maybe she would demand he step back from Meridian to make room for Connor's complete takeover. Either way, she had underestimated his awareness of their conspiracy. "Yes, we certainly do need to talk," he replied, his voice carrying none of the hurt or confusion she expected. Helena's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, confusion replacing confident anticipation. She had prepared for denial, anger, possibly even pleading, but not this calm certainty that suggested he already knew whatever she planned to reveal. "You've been distant lately," she began, attempting to regain control of their interaction. "I don't know what's gotten into you recently." Nathaniel shook his head slowly, a gesture that held 15 years of accumulated disappointment. "Don't pretend you don't know what this is about, Helena." The color drained from her face before returning in a rush of defensive heat. "I'm not sure what you mean by that." Her voice carried less conviction than before, but she maintained the pretense with admirable determination. Nathaniel stepped closer, no longer content to remain in the background of his own life. "Cut the performance," he said quietly. "You think I don't know about you and Connor? The affair has been going on for 8 months, but the conspiracy against me started much earlier than that." The carefully arranged dinner suddenly felt like evidence in a courtroom, each perfect detail now revealing calculation rather than affection. Helena's composure cracked for just an instant, genuine shock replacing practiced innocence before she reassembled her mask. "I don't know where you're getting these ideas, but—" Nathaniel interrupted with a gesture that carried finality. "I've watched everything, Helena. The late meetings that weren't about business, the weekend conferences that had no attendees, the text messages you deleted but I recovered." His voice remained level despite the emotional storm beneath. "I know about your plan to force me out of Meridian completely while you and Connor take control of everything I built." The silence that followed felt dense enough to suffocate them both. Helena stared at him with growing realization that her careful manipulation had been transparent to him for months. She was trapped between the anniversary dinner she had staged and the truth she could no longer escape. For the first time in years, Nathaniel saw her without masks, just a woman caught in consequences of her own creation. "Why?" he asked, the single word carrying the weight of their entire relationship. "After everything we built together, why betray me like this?" Helena's face softened momentarily, guilt flickering in her eyes before being replaced by something harder. "I did what I had to do," she said, her voice turning cold with justification. "You were never giving me what I needed, Nathaniel. Connor could offer me more of everything that matters." The honesty, brutal as it was, provided clarity that months of deception had obscured. She had chosen visibility over substance, public recognition over private devotion. And now you've lost it all, Nathaniel replied simply. The weight of his words settled over them both like falling snow, covering everything they had built in cold inevitability. While this confrontation unfolded in suburban domesticity, Connor Walsh was conducting his own performance in Meridian's executive suite. He had spent the day in meetings that reinforced his carefully constructed identity as the company's visionary leader, accepting praise for innovations he had never conceived and strategic decisions he had never made. The polished brass elevator panels reflected his satisfied expression as he descended toward what he believed would be another routine day of maintaining his facade. His assistant Sandra had warned him about an urgent meeting with Lawrence Patterson from Helix Industries, but Connor felt no anxiety about facing another business leader who would inevitably treat him as Meridian's true founder. Lawrence Patterson's entrance into Connor's mahogany-appointed office carried none of the deference Connor expected from potential partners. Instead of pleasantries about mutual opportunities, Lawrence's expression conveyed something between pity and professional obligation. "I've just come from a meeting with Mr. Cross's legal team," Lawrence said without preamble. "There's been a significant development regarding Meridian's ownership structure. The majority shareholder has decided to take a more active role in operations." Connor's confusion was genuine and complete. He had always understood that some anonymous investors held portions of Meridian, but the company belonged to him in every way that mattered. "What are you talking about?" Connor demanded, his practiced charm giving way to raw bewilderment. "I built this company. I own Meridian Technologies." Lawrence slid a document across the polished desk with the careful deliberation of a physician delivering terminal diagnosis. "You might want to examine this carefully," he suggested. Connor's hands trembled slightly as he scanned the legal documentation, his eyes struggling to process what he was reading. The papers confirmed that Nathaniel Cross was not merely an operations manager, but the majority shareholder and actual founder of Meridian Technologies. Everything Connor had believed about his own success was built on systematic deception. The press release attached to the legal documents felt like physical assault. The headline read, "Nathaniel Cross assumes direct control of Meridian Technologies, steps into CEO role." Connor's entire existence at the company had been a performance, with Nathaniel as the unseen director who had allowed him to take credit for genuine innovations. Every board meeting where Connor had presented strategic visions, every interview where he had discussed his entrepreneurial journey, every moment of public recognition had been elaborate theater. Lawrence watched Connor's realization with uncomfortable sympathy. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "but there's no way around it. You've been terminated. Meridian is no longer your company." Connor's office, which minutes earlier had represented his achievements, now felt like a museum display of his delusions. The Harvard diploma, the industry awards, the photographs with world leaders, all of it had been granted to him by Nathaniel's invisible generosity. Without that support, Connor was revealed as exactly what he had always feared himself to be, a failure desperate enough to accept credit for another man's work. The imposter syndrome he had fought so hard to overcome had been accurate all along. Nathaniel had been the puppet master, allowing Connor to believe in his own importance while maintaining complete control over the reality that mattered. Meanwhile, at home, Nathaniel faced the more difficult task of explaining the situation to Gregory and Isabel. The dining room where Helena had planned her theatrical anniversary had become a courtroom where their children would learn about deception, consequence, and the complexity of adult relationships. Both teenagers stood silent as Nathaniel presented evidence of their mother's conspiracy, their faces reflecting confusion, anger, and hurt in shifting combinations. They were collateral damage in a war they had never chosen to join, torn between loyalty to the mother they loved and painful truth they were beginning to understand. "I've always protected you both," Nathaniel said, his voice carrying the weight of difficult decisions made over many years. "But what your mother and Connor have done goes beyond infidelity. This was about destroying everything I built, everything we had as a family." Helena's composure finally cracked completely as the magnitude of exposure settled over her. Her children, who had once adored her unconditionally, now looked at her with disappointment that cut deeper than any anger could have. The perfect mother they remembered was being replaced by someone capable of elaborate deception and betrayal. Nathaniel opened his laptop and displayed the evidence he had compiled over months of careful investigation. Photographs of Helena and Connor together in hotel suites, boardrooms, even their own home when they thought he was traveling. Time-stamped recordings of conversations where they discussed plans to force him out of Meridian entirely. Email exchanges about manipulating the children to support Connor's version of reality. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of the family life they had all believed in. "These aren't just photos of an affair," Nathaniel continued, his voice steady despite the emotional cost of this revelation. "This is proof of conspiracy to steal everything from me, my company, my legacy, and my relationship with you both. They plan to destroy me while pretending to be the loving wife and devoted partner." The room fell into heavy silence, broken only by Isabel's quiet sobbing. Gregory stood frozen between anger at his father for destroying their family and growing understanding that the destruction had actually been caused by people he trusted. The choice Nathaniel offered his children was perhaps the most difficult decision he had ever made as a father. "You can stay with your mother and Connor, or you can come home with me," he said. "But understand this, whatever you choose is permanent. There will be no changing minds later when emotions settle." It was not vindictive ultimatum, but necessary lesson about consequences. Actions created results that could not be undone by apologies or time. Gregory looked at his father with confusion replacing anger, struggling to process how the man he had dismissed as unambitious was actually the power behind everything they knew. Isabel remained caught between parents, unable to speak through her tears. Helena found her voice long enough to protest. "They're just children, Nathaniel. You can't expect them to choose between us." But Nathaniel's response carried the authority of someone who had spent years learning about loyalty and betrayal. "I'm not asking them to choose sides," he replied. "I'm asking them to choose what's right. They need to understand that your actions affected everyone, not just me. You didn't just hurt me, you hurt them too." The weight of personal responsibility, something Helena had avoided through months of rationalization, finally settled on her shoulders. 3 weeks later, Nathaniel stood at the podium of Meridian Technologies' annual Innovation Gala, surveying the crowd that had gathered to celebrate the company's achievements. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and designer gowns, filled with industry leaders who believed they were attending routine corporate celebration. Helena and Connor sat near the front, their faces tense with uncertainty about what Nathaniel might reveal. They knew their secret was exposed, but hoped he would handle the situation with discretion that protected everyone's dignity. "Good evening," Nathaniel began, his voice carrying across the silent room with calm authority. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to start by saying how proud I am of what Meridian Technologies has achieved. For years, this company has been synonymous with innovation and breakthrough thinking. But tonight, I'm here to set the record straight about the story you've all been told." The murmur that rippled through the crowd suggested they sensed something significant was about to unfold, though few could have predicted the complete upheaval that would follow. "Many of you know me as Nathaniel Cross," he continued, his words precise and clear. "What you don't know is that I am the founder of Meridian Technologies. For the past 10 years, I've been the one behind every major decision, every technological breakthrough, every strategic move that built this company. But the world has been led to believe that Connor Walsh was the visionary who created our success. The truth is, Connor was nothing more than a frontman, a carefully managed public face for achievements that were never his own. The reaction was immediate and electric, whispers and gasps spreading through the audience like wildfire. Screens around the ballroom flickered to life, displaying documentation that Nathaniel had prepared with legal precision. Email exchanges where Connor claimed credit for Nathaniel's innovations, audio recordings of conversations where he dismissed the actual founder as merely competent support staff, photographs of meetings where strategies developed by Nathaniel were presented as Connor's original thinking. Each piece of evidence had been verified by independent sources and prepared for potential legal challenges. The audience watched in stunned fascination as the complete scope of deception was revealed with corporate efficiency. Connor stood abruptly, his chair scraping against polished marble as he prepared to defend himself, but Nathaniel raised his hand in a gesture that commanded silence. The room grew even more tense, hundreds of eyes moving between the two men like spectators at a dramatic trial. "Connor," Nathaniel said, turning his attention to the man who had lived off stolen accomplishments. "For years you've taken credit for my work, collecting awards and admiration while I remained invisible. You've built your entire career on a foundation of lies, and tonight, that ends. Your deception ends here. Helena's face had gone completely pale, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the devastation spreading across her features. She realized that her private betrayal was about to become public humiliation, witnessed by everyone who mattered in their professional and social world. The conspiracy she and Connor had planned in secret hotel rooms was being dissected under brilliant lights before an audience of their peers. There would be no recovery from this level of exposure, no way to rebuild reputations that were being systematically destroyed. "I have contracts, patents, and financial records," Nathaniel continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Every major innovation attributed to Connor originated from my research and development. Every strategic partnership was built on relationships I cultivated over years of work. Every success story you've heard about his entrepreneurial genius was carefully crafted fiction designed to protect the real story of how Meridian was built." The silence in the room was complete now, broken only by the soft hum of air conditioning and the occasional camera flash from journalists who had suddenly realized they were witnessing major industry news. As Nathaniel stepped away from the podium, the crowd erupted into confused applause, unsure whether they were celebrating justice or mourning deception. The power dynamic that had defined their industry for years had been revealed as complete fabrication, and everyone present would need to recalibrate their understanding of how business really worked. Connor's career was finished, his reputation destroyed so thoroughly that recovery seemed impossible. Helena's social standing had collapsed along with her marriage, leaving her isolated from the world she had sacrificed everything to join. The aftermath played out over months of legal proceedings, media coverage, and industry speculation. Gregory chose to stay with Helena, supporting his mother despite understanding her betrayal, while Isabel decided to live with Nathaniel, though their relationship required careful rebuilding. The children's decisions reflected their different personalities and ways of processing trauma, but both choices carried permanent consequences that would shape their adult lives. Nathaniel respected Gregory's loyalty to Helena even though it meant accepting his son's rejection of him, at least for the time being. Rebuilding his relationship with Isabel required patience and skills Nathaniel had never needed to develop. Their early conversations were awkward, filled with questions about why he had kept so many secrets and whether the father she thought she knew had ever really existed. Through therapy sessions and countless hours of honest discussion, they began constructing new understanding based on truth rather than protective fiction. Isabel gradually learned to see her father as someone who had made difficult choices with good intentions, even when those choices had backfired in ways he never anticipated. Nathaniel's attempts to maintain connection with Gregory were met with silence that grew more painful with each unanswered message. Birthday cards were returned unopened, Christmas gifts remained unclaimed, and phone calls went straight to voicemail. Yet Nathaniel persisted in small ways, sending anonymous help when Gregory struggled financially at his restaurant job, paying for car repairs through intermediaries, ensuring his son's college fund remained intact despite their broken relationship. These acts of love carried no expectation of gratitude or reconciliation, just a father's determination to care for his child even when that caring was unwanted. The transformation of Meridian Technologies under Nathaniel's direct leadership proved that his hidden approach had been limiting the company's true potential. With transparency replacing secrecy, employee morale improved dramatically as workers understood they were contributing to genuine innovation rather than elaborate deception. Stock prices rose steadily as investors gained confidence in leadership they could actually evaluate and hold accountable. Industry recognition followed as Nathaniel's authentic vision for technological advancement became visible to the world that had previously known only Connor's borrowed charisma. 1 year after the gala revelation, Nathaniel sat alone in his office as evening shadows stretched across the city skyline. Meridian Technologies had achieved unprecedented success under his direct leadership, earning industry awards and setting new standards for corporate transparency. His professional vindication was complete, his reputation established as one of the tech industry's most innovative leaders. Yet despite these achievements, or perhaps because of them, he felt the weight of what victory had cost him. Isabel's presence in his daily life provided genuine happiness. Their relationship rebuilt on honesty that had been missing during her childhood. She was thriving in high school, her academic performance improved by stability she had gained from living with truth rather than elaborate fiction. Their evening conversations had become highlight of Nathaniel's days, moments when he could be simply a father rather than corporate leader or victim of betrayal. But Gregory's continued absence created persistent ache that no professional success could heal. Helena had moved to a smaller apartment across town, struggling financially and socially after losing access to the lifestyle Connor's position had provided. Their divorce proceedings had been handled with precision rather than vindictiveness, though the financial settlement reflected consequences of her choices rather than generosity she might have expected from their marriage. She attempted to rebuild her life with dignity, but the public nature of her humiliation made fresh starts difficult in their close-knit professional community. Connor had relocated to another city, taking work as a consultant for smaller companies that either didn't know about his history or were willing to overlook it for reduced fees. The trajectory from celebrated CEO to marginal advisor illustrated how quickly reputations could collapse when built on false foundations. His Harvard MBA still hung on the wall, but it now felt more like museum artifact than professional credential. As Nathaniel reflected on the year's events, he recognized that justice had indeed been served, though not in the clean, satisfying way he had initially imagined. Betrayal had been exposed, consequences had been faced, and truth had finally emerged from shadows where he had kept it hidden. But the cost of that justice included relationships that could never be fully repaired and trust that had been permanently damaged. The loyalty he had always valued so highly was revealed to be more complex and fragile than his younger self had understood. The melancholy that settled over him in quiet moments was not regret exactly, but recognition of life's fundamental complexity. He had made choices that protected some things while destroying others, and the people he loved most had paid prices they never deserved to pay. Gregory's absence would remain constant reminder that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt regardless of who held the match. Yet Isabel's presence proved that healing was possible when both parties chose to do the difficult work of building something new from the wreckage of what came before. Looking toward the future, Nathaniel saw possibilities he had never allowed himself to consider during his years in shadow. Meridian Technologies was positioned to make genuine contributions to technological advancement, guided by values of honesty and innovation rather than image management and borrowed glory. His relationship with Isabel continued deepening as they learned to trust each other with uncomfortable truths. Even the possibility of new romantic relationships seemed less frightening now that he understood the difference between protective deception and genuine intimacy. The city lights below his office window twinkled like stars, each one representing someone else's story of success, failure, love, loss, and the endless complexity of human relationships. Nathaniel had learned that loyalty, once broken, was never quite the same, but that didn't mean it couldn't be rebuilt into something different and perhaps stronger. The consequences of betrayal would indeed follow him for the rest of his life, but so would the wisdom gained from surviving it and the deeper connections forged in its aftermath. Sometimes the hardest challenges really did reveal strength we never knew we possessed, though that strength came at prices we never expected to pay.